conversation. So Marjory, welcome to Essential Ingredients. So happy to have you here. Excited to learn a little bit about your journey, what brought you there. And let's kick it off by just letting our community know who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, what I do now and who I am now is Marjory Wildcraft, and I basically teach people backyard food production and home medicine. So the skills to keeping a home together, which used to be very, very common. But that is not at all how I started out.
I read that. I was, what's interesting to me is you're not alone there, right? People have a journey getting to where they are today, and oftentimes where they're meant to be and where they love to be. And I know that, we probably have listeners that are tuning in today that, can really resonate with your story because it's been very varied until you got to this point.
It's hopefully empowering too, because I was not born in a hippie commune or on some organic farm or anything like that. Like nothing could be further from the truth about that. And my first degree actually is in electrical engineering. And
Wow.
yeah, my family, we grew up in South Florida. We weren't, if you're poor and even in the United States, you're actually doing pretty well, but they didn't have a lot of money. Let's just say that. And like a lot of kids that come from that kind of a background, I was very interested in wealth.
Mhm.
And when I was in Hong Kong, which is like the ultra capitalistic center of the world, I actually got over there with Motorola. I was an expat managing a couple of mobile telephone networks. And the guys that worked for me said, "Hey, Marjorie, you got to take this class with this guy named Robert. He's like really interesting. He's all about money." And I said, do we know him? And they said, "No, we never heard of him before, but he's really good. You have to go." So I went. And then through a lot more classes with Robert, I ended up being inspired to leave engineering. And ultimately, I chose Austin, Texas as a real estate market. And by the time I was 40, I had made my first million. And things were so successful that Robert asked me if I would be on some infomercials he was making. So I was on national television for 4 years selling rich dad, poor dad stuff for Robert Kiyosaki. So, none of that involves growing food in there, right? No, there's
No.
no, not at all. Businesswoman, engineer. But I was volunteering on a project to get locally grown food into an elementary school. This is outside of Austin, Texas, a little town called Red Rock. And working with some big movers and shakers in Texas, and we were going to just do it there and then duplicate it all across the state and get, or get clean organic food in the school system. Super important. Well, that project was an utter and complete failure, and that failure absolutely changed my life. Now, it didn't look like it, like you'd think. The school wanted it, the teachers wanted it. There's all kinds of federal and grant state money for it. Everybody. There's reams of studies that show that when children eat higher quality food, they score higher on intelligence tests, and
Totally.
they have less behavioral problems. I mean, it just makes sense, right? So,
Are you familiar with Steve Ritz?
no, tell me about Steve.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when you were talking about kids, he does programs in the backs of in schools in urban areas, New York City, the Bronx, etc. And he helps them learn how to grow food. So it supports their ability to do math and science and all these different things. And as a result, many of these kids are doing really much better, going to colleges and being much more successful. So as you're sitting there saying this, there really is a movement to integrate this in school systems in urban areas with families so that people have greater access and can really thrive
Yeah, that is the next
mentally,
step.
physically, all of it.
Yeah, I've seen those greenhouses on the tops of schools in New York City, and I'm like, I want to go visit those. Those look so cool. But we were just looking at getting local farmers to provide, the vegetables. And the reason that thing, the whole project failed was there weren't enough locally grown organic farmers within the entire county to provide even part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school. And I just literally that night, I will never forget that night, as I was literally just my body was just violently shaking because first of all, the drive from Austin to Red Rock suddenly made sense. There's no farmers out there. There's some open space, maybe a few cows, but there's a Dollar General going in and there's a subdivision. but there's no food growing out in the countryside. There's only 4 days worth of food in inventory in the grocery stores. We have a just-in-time trucking system. It travels 1,500 miles to get to you. And at that time, the population's bigger now, but I was surrounded by 20 million Texans who were armed to the teeth. Seriously. And I'm like, that whole saying about 9 days away from anarchy or whatever. I mean, I realized that even though I had a lot of money and a lot of wealth, there are scenarios where no amount of money um, will get you what you really need. And I had two small kids, and I just said, that's it. Whatever I've been doing in my life up to now is unimportant. There's lots of people who know how to make money. God does not need another person to be able to make money. But there's hardly anybody anymore who knows how to grow food. And
I totally agree. And I also think that, some people live in larger areas and it's much easier for them to grow a garden.
mhm.
But there's a lot more challenge in urban areas and understanding how to do that and how to create enough abundance of these foods so that people can feed their family, especially as things get more expensive and we don't have good access. You have more control. um, and so I know we've had many people that have tuned into the podcast wondering, okay, well, that's great. And we know that you can do this if you have a garden, but how do we do this in a more urban environment? And so, when I saw what you were doing, I thought, wow, here's an opportunity to talk to those people, the people in particular that want to be able to do this, but don't either have the vision because it's not their core competency, which fair enough,
Oh
right?
yeah, it's not anybody's core
It's
competency
not.
anymore.
And if you don't see it and you're not grown up with it, it's much harder to integrate.
Yeah,
So, I'd love to hear sort of from you if one of our guests were tuning in and they're asking, okay, I want to do this. I live in a high rise,
yep.
or, I live in the middle of New York City or Miami, Florida. How do I make this work so I can feed my family?
Well, now if you live in an urban area like that, so yeah, let me riff on that for what you can do right in your own property. And what I would recommend you start with is a couple of herbs on a windowsill. And let me give you the directions for that. First of all, by the way, when you're cooking, right, you're doing your spaghetti or whatever, if you add just a little bit of fresh basil, it completely, well, with the name of your podcast, right? It completely changes that. It just makes the whole thing just pop and come alive. In fact, when I started doing that, my family thought I had changed. They were like, "Hey, mom, you got a new recipe?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a whole new recipe. I just added like a tablespoon of chopped basil and fresh basil, and it's great when you see your kids asking for seconds. Makes you feel good. So there's like incredible power in just some fresh herbs. And I have had many, many, many people that just started with a few fresh herbs on a windowsill that then later on went to do much greater things. So don't underestimate the power. The other thing is learning from those 3 or 4 plants that you have there. Everything you learn there is going to be appropriate for when you have maybe a 4 by 4 square plot or a bigger garden, or even if you're managing acres of crops. And don't tell me you're not going to ever be managing acres of crops, because we are in a friggin' vortex and you have no idea what you're going to be doing even next year. So it's a possibility. But everything you learn from those plants, like if it's not getting enough sunlight, they get kind of pale, and what we call leggy is they just tend to grow straight up, right? And they're looking for sunlight. They're trying. Or if you forgot to water them, they start turning yellow, and then the ends start getting crispy brown, and then they die. So these things that you're learning, they're completely identical to what you're going to see with their plants, and they're teaching you already. I would really recommend to get started. Some of the toughest, most badass plants that are tough to kill, although you probably will, so don't be worried about it, is going to be mint and basil, and then chives or even scallions. And those also have the biggest impact.
I want to ask you about mints. I
Mhm,
have mint
mhm.
and it is taking over everywhere. I have it on
Yeah.
the, oh my God. So what do you do in your kitchen if you're, you know, is it a bad idea to mix your mint with your chives and your basil? Does it need its own pots?
I would have them all in separate pots. Yeah,
All in
for sure.
separate pots.
And isn't
Okay.
that great that it's like megalomaniacal like that? Means you got a lot of mint. You make mint tea. You can
I have so
make
much mint.
candied mints. You can throw mint. You can give bunches of it away to your neighbors. I mean, that is what the abundance is all about. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
you're getting all kinds of micronutrients and stuff from that mint that you're growing. So growing a few herbs is just a fantastic way to start. And I've had a lot of people just start with that. And then a couple of years later, they've got chickens and rabbits and goats and whatever. So, um, actually, I met one woman who was in my community, and she started out with that, and she said, "I just wanted to grow more, so I went and found a house with a yard. Because I just wanted to grow more food. It had nothing. I was like, okay, I get you." So let's talk about some other things that may or may not need a lot of light. Um, you sprouts. A lot of people just do that with a simple grow light, and boom, like in 5 to 8 days you've got sprouts, which
Wow.
not a lot of caloric density, but and micrograms, not a lot of caloric density, but there's a huge amount of life force and nutrition in those bad boys, and they will really help your health. We just got done with a whole series on the Grow Network blog on microgreens, and how to grow them in apartments and condominiums, because people have been asking us. I think there's like a 5 or 6 part blog series we just created that'll teach you everything you need to know about growing microgreens in your house.
Wow, that's really amazing because I think that, some of this stuff sounds like it's fairly simple, but is intimidating.
Yeah.
Intimidating because, we have so many things going on in our lives and we don't want to forget to do this. And then also when you're thinking about what you're going to cook, remembering that to incorporate that,
Yeah.
right? I go to the grocery store and I'm like, wait, what do I have in my garden? I should eat that first.
Yep. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
like changing the narrative for you to think about this. And I think it takes a little time, but even the other day I was making dinner and I went into the garden. I'm like, okay, we can have frisee, you know. So I think it's where in the past I would think about what is it that I want to eat, right? Oh, I want to make this. Oh, it's not local. Oh, it has to come from Mexico. Oh, it's not in season. Or, oh my God, wow, how expensive that is. But if you change the narrative and you say, you know what, this is what I have in my garden, let me investigate what I could make with this. You start to eat local, you start to eat your own food, and you can have more control over the quality of it and the accessibility of it. And you get to grow what you want to eat and what you can offer to your family.
And it really expands your tastes horizons. And, you know, don't be afraid to experiment. And if it doesn't work out and it's horrible, just put it in the compost bucket, start over. It's okay. You'll be fine. I
So
have
when you
been,
first started this, I'm
yeah.
curious,
Uh-huh.
and you decided, you had seen there was the lack of, vegetation and farmers in Texas. How did you end up in Puerto Rico now kicking off this grow network to create, inspiration for others to be able to grow their own food, fruits and vegetables?
Well, actually, yeah, I started the Grow Network. So I had the big wake up call. I would say that was about the 2003 era, and there was a bunch of other things happening. Like I had a strong intuition, and I started to back it up with research that the real estate market was going to collapse. I basically foresaw what was going to happen in 2008. So I realized I wanted to get out of that, and it took me a while to unwind it. Yeah, and then we bought a property out in Central Texas, and uh, I started full blown homesteading, homeschooling. And as soon as you start growing food, you start to realize you got to have community. And I was starting, it took me a while to really start figuring things out. And then that engineering, I'm like, what is this system here? What's the simplest way? What's the most effective way? There's a lot to figure out. And I started teaching classes locally. And you're on to something when somebody calls you up and says, I've got 20 people. I'll be over Saturday. Can you teach us? I'm like, that never, that doesn't, if you've ever organized events, you know how rare that is. So yeah. And everybody kept saying, hey, Marjorie, you need to make a video out of this. You need to video this because you need to expand what you've got here is really, really good. And I wanted people to come to see it and experience it and take like, here's why the kitchen garden is right outside my back door so that I can just grab it, if I had a garden that's even 50 feet away, I'm less likely to use it, right? That's why they're called kitchen gardens. And I just wanted to have people have that experience and see it. And but everybody, so I took a year off and scripted and rescripted and scripted this video. And then back then, video editing took a lot longer and was way more expensive than it is now. And I created, I don't know if you remember DVDs. I made my first DVD called, Backyard Food Production. And it, I'd put like $30,000 of the family savings into this thing. And we put up the website and nothing sold. Like crickets, like just because you put up a website, it doesn't mean it's great. Although we did have almost 500,000 illegal downloads on torrent sites and things like that. But if you remember back then in the day how that went. So anyway, I said, well, I think I have something that's really useful here, and I got to figure this out. And I had to come up with a way to, recoup the savings that I'd taken from the family's coffer. So I ended up, at that point in time, became a digital marketer because I had to figure out how to sell these things. One thing that I found really worked for me well was like what we're doing right now. I'd get on podcasts and talk to people and tell them what I had, and let them know, you want to know how to grow food. Here's a way to do it. Go to backyardfoodproduction.com. I'll show you how to grow food. And I've got a free webinar there. And in that webinar, I show you how to grow half of your own food in your backyard, even if you're older, out of shape, have no experience. And it's true. I really have dialed in like the 3 easiest ways to grow food in a backyard. So
So
that's
when you were coming up with this and you were hoping to create change, hoping to inspire people and, support people to grow half their own food in their garden, if you look at the population, what percentage were you hoping to convert? Like if we just look at your community, let's just say, what percentage were you hoping to convert to be able to do this for themselves? And what percentage have you been able to convert?
I don't have any specific numbers like that. Just
Okay.
we used to have a big forums area, and I would get a lot of feedback, and I would guess the one thing that I'm sort of known for is the grow half system, like how to grow half your own food in your backyard, even if you have no experience, you're older and you're out of shape. That headline took quite a while to get to, by the way. So that did not just come out of the air magically. We were playing with a lot of different headlines, and I'll talk about split testing if you want. But I, as far as I can guess, I think there are several 100,000 people who have implemented that grow half system. And everything from I've taught little kids to elders, but we don't have any real hard data on that. It's not really something you can track that well.
No, I understand. It sounds like it came from a place of passion, which is not uncommon, right, for entrepreneurs and a void that you see that you want to fill. So when you did this, and you wanted to kick this off, did you look at this as like another career and you needed to be able to, monetize this?
So that it's really been purpose and mission driven. And I will tell you that the growing food niche is not a lucrative niche at all. I did really, really well. We had a good couple of run for a couple of years there. And I can give you some numbers. In 2019, the Grow Network grossed about 1.6 million. That was our biggest revenue year. I had a team of 8, and we had been doing over $1 million for a couple of years. Now, what your gross revenue is does not reflect profit. I mean, we're making a little bit of profit, but almost any time I had new profit, I would roll that into something else that was vitally important that people were asking more. Home medicine was a huge thing. People were like, I really want to learn the basics of home medicine, take care of my family. And so we developed a whole bunch of products on that. I need to learn about how to build a greenhouse. So we, figured that out. We ended up creating an academy because we have like 35 courses now for things people had asked us for: how to keep goats, how to keep sheep, different styles of gardening, home medicine, how to grow cannabis. That's a great gateway. That's
So
a
what's
great
your
gateway
overall
gardening.
mission
Yeah.
with these courses, and supporting people with home medicine and home agriculture to feed themselves? What is the overall mission and what do you hope to achieve?
Homegrown food on every table.
Homegrown
That's what,
food on every table. And then
yeah.
if we look forward, 3, 5 years, how do
Hmm.
you hope this is going to evolve and what do you see?
Well, it used to be like a little tongue in cheek joke. Sorry, I got that backwards.
That was a
You
tongue
know,
twister.
homegrown food on every table. But honestly, we're going to have homegrown food on every table 3, 5, 10 years from now. Probably more like the 3 to 5 year time frame, because um, it takes 10 calories of energy to get 1 calorie of food on your plate. That is completely unsustainable. That will not go on forever. That won't go on for much longer now. We're already seeing the collapse of these systems that get you food. So whether I do anything or not, you are ultimately, if you're going to be eating, it will be homegrown food. It's just, the existing commercial food supply is imploding right now as we're talking. So um, there's also some other very, very good reasons. And you asked me how many people and what percentage. I think we need to have about a minimum of 70% of people in any food shed doing backyard food production. And the reason is genetics. So the USDA in the 1990s did a study, and they compared seed catalogs from 1890 with seed catalogs from 1990. And they showed it was tragic, like something like a 94% loss in seed varieties, because backyard producers were keeping it alive, we're keeping the strain going. We know that this squash is really useful because it stores through the winter better, so we grow that, and almost all of that is gone now.
You know what? That as we're sitting here talking and we're talking about home medicine and homegrown agriculture, you know, it takes me back. It's like all of a sudden I feel like we're going back to a long time ago, and ancient traditions are now colliding with our new traditions and some of the things that we learned, and we're sort of going back and forth to find that new platform that's going to work.
Totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. And there's some things we let go of that we really have to pick back up, and part of that is backyard food production. I'd also like to, and you'd mentioned this, but I'd also like to make a quick correction. Everybody always thinks of me as gardens, and I definitely love gardens. But the most productive food source that you can have is going to be animal products. So, for example, a 100 square foot garden, which is what I recommend if somebody, it's what's in that webinar at backyardfoodproduction.com. Another pitch. You got to learn how to do those all the time when you're on podcasts. Try not to be obnoxious. But I recommend like two small raised beds, 50 square feet each, so 5 feet by 10 feet long. And in like 2 growing seasons, you can produce 50, 60,000 calories if you're growing some of the more calorically rich foods like potatoes and things like that. Um, but a small backyard flock of laying hens, like 6 laying hens, a laying hen will produce 250 eggs a year, and a medium-sized egg is 62 calories. So we're talking about 1,500 eggs a year from this small group of 6 hens in your backyard. That's like 95,000 calories. But more importantly, what it is 3 egg omelets for breakfast for you for the entire year, plus 33 dozen eggs to give away. So you've got breakfast handled in like you build the coop and run, or you get somebody to build it. Get the feed and water, go to Craigslist or a feed store, buy the laying hens, and I mean, really, in just a couple of weeks, you can have egg production happening. You can have breakfast handled for a long time, right? So, animal products are a lot more calorically efficient and also nutritionally dense. The other thing about backyard food production is the most difficult macronutrient to produce is fat. So if you think about it, in a garden, there are no fatty vegetables. No eggplant or green beans, tomato. None of that has any fat in it. It's a very Spartan diet. The next most difficult is protein. You start getting into your beans and legumes and things like that, and you get some protein. The easiest thing to produce are going to be carbohydrates. It could be like your potatoes and your squashes and your carrots and beets, and then there is forage. Fiber everywhere. There's all kinds of greens everywhere. You don't even need to garden for it. There's probably wild all around you that you didn't realize it. But animal products are by far the best way to produce protein and fat, which are the most difficult macronutrients.
So, as we wrap this up, and I feel like there's been so much, it's been very content heavy, a lot of different things that people can do. If we just wanted to break it down and you're talking specifically to one of our guests and they said, "Can you give me the three things I got to do to kick this off?" What would that be?
Well, first of all, I would say set your intention. You say, I really want to grow food. And I'll tell you a quick story about this. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to say this. So I always get this question about, and have an open mind and an open heart, and the universe will, and you can use God or whatever your particular religion is, but I like universe. It will, we're here. It will help you. It will guide you. But you got to keep an open heart and an open mind. So I've had this question of like, how can I help people to grow more food in apartments and condominiums? And then one day, my teenage son, we found out he had been growing psilocybin in his closet, um, which was not cool. So the magic mushrooms, right?
Right.
And so we dealt with that as parents. But then I'm thinking, you can grow mushrooms in a closet. So the universe brought me the answer to one of the questions I had. It's like, oh, you can grow mushrooms in an apartment or a condominium. And they're, those portobellos, some of those others are like, they're pretty substantial. It's
Yeah.
not just like some leafy greens. So open your heart and open your mind, and you ask a question very sincerely, and the universe will answer you. Just you just got to be paying attention and realize it's not going to be anything that you've already thought about, because you would already be doing that if you'd have thought about it. So that's my first advice: is set an intention and open up your heart and mind that you'll get it answered. um, the other is, of course, go to backyardfoodproduction.com. It's a free webinar. Even if you have no experience, you're older, you're out of shape, I'll show you how to grow food. And it's mostly targeted toward a backyard, but we also do cover the apartment and condominium series. And the other thing I would say is get started today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that it's always great for me to talk to folks like yourselves who are creating change, having an impact in the world, and really very mission driven, because that's what drives me. And I know that our listeners and the founders and the researchers that are tuning in today and tune into Essential Ingredients, rely on this kind of information. Whether they do it completely or they use it for inspiration to innovate in their own way, it's really inspiring. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I want to just thank our guests for tuning in. It's a family, it's a community. They're everyone, I feel like these are my friends that tune in each week because they know that we're going to have somebody great like yourself on to share information so we can also make great change. So thank you to our guests. Thank you to you for tuning in and
Thank
joining
you.
me in this conversation. For those folks that want to learn more, what's the best website to go to?
Backyardfoodproduction.com.
And if anybody wanted to connect directly with you, maybe they have a couple questions, or maybe they want to innovate and they want to, hear more about your experience, what's the best way to connect with you?
Reach me via email at Marjory, Marjory, number three, Marjory3 at proton.me. And yeah, I'm getting a lot of people reaching out that way. So we
Awesome,
have a lot
Marjory.
of really great projects going on. So, but the key to it and the foundation to everything is backyard food production.
Awesome. Thanks so much.